Hello all, welcome to Tech with SAS. In this video, we will talk about a circuit breaker pattern in microservices. This video is in continuation of my previous video on the microservices architecture pattern. So if you haven't seen that video, I would recommend that you please see that video, then continue on this one because this is basically dealing with the fault tolerance in the microservices. Okay, so let us see how the circuit breaker pattern works in microservices. So first of all, the question is why do we need the circuit breaker pattern at first place? So as we know that in microservices architecture, there will be hundreds of small microservices that will be part of a big application or big system. And in that microservices communication, they will be calling each other to get some information. For example, in this diagram, you can see that there is an API gateway, which basically gets the request from client. Then we have a orchestrator API that basically calls the many web services, and then the response which we get from those web services, it collates them and send back to the client. Okay, so here you can see that the orchestrator API is calling the payment microservices. Also, it is calling the list of past payment microservice. So, I mean, a very simple example, but there can be hundreds of microservices that will be called in this flow. So now, if all the microservices which are part of this flow are working very fine, there is no issue, right? All are responding within time, and also the SLA is not breached. There is no connectivity issue. Then all good. So response will come back from this third-party vendor microservice. Then it will come also from here, like list of past payment microservice. All the response will be going back to the orchestrated API microservice. So it will send response back to the API gateway. But what happens in case the third party vendor microservice is down, or maybe it is slow, right? So this payment microservice is waiting for this third party vendor microservice to give response, but it's not responding, or maybe it is very slow, or the connectivity between these services has gone down for some time. Maybe like it might be a temporary issue, or it might take some time long. So this payment microservice we keep waiting for the third party vendor service to respond. So because of this, resources are held up, right? The threads are waiting that third party vendor service to respond. So I mean, the system become very slow, and it's very unpleasant experience for the customer, right? So if they're waiting for response, so because we can't respond back in time, so it's like our experience goes down. So so the solution for this problem is the circuit breaker pattern, right? So what happens that whenever we implement the circuit breaker pattern, so in that time, so as soon as we detect that okay, this service is no longer responding, or it is failing intermittently, so we can basically uh, disconnect it, right? Basically, the circuit trips, and we will not call that service frequently. Maybe we'll wait for some time, and we can send the response which is already cached, or maybe we can send some about messages back to the client, right? But overall response will be faster because we're not keep waiting for that failing microservice to respond back, right? So now let us see how this pattern works in detailed manner. So yeah, here is a sequence diagram. In this, there are three components. One is the calling microservices. That is basically the microservice, which you can say the payment microservice, which we saw in previous diagram. And the this is the product service. Whatever response we require, like we had this that third-party vendor service, right? So now we had seen that, okay, when product service was down, the calling microservice kept waiting for that. But now what we can do, we can add one more component, okay, that is called a circuit breaker in between them. Okay. So how will it work? So there are three scenarios. In first scenario, when the calling microservice is calling the product service and there is no issue, there is no connectivity issue, neither the product service is down, everything is good, right? So request goes to circuit breaker, it's like a pass through. Okay, there is no circuit tripping and everything is fine. So the request reaches to the product service and it gets response on time. So first case is happy scenario, there is no issue, right? In the next case, what happens like suppose this product service is down, maybe it is down intermittently or down for a longer time, or maybe it is slow because it depends on other microservices. At that time, this circuit breaker will come into picture. It will detect, okay, this service is no longer responding in the SLA, or maybe it is not responding at all. Then what it will do, it will trip the circuit. So now the circuit will trip, and the next call which are going to happen, right? It will not call the product service. So whenever there are new calls coming to call the product service, circuit breaker will not call that. Okay, because of that, this calling microservice will not keep waiting for that response from the provider service. So when suppose the circuit is down, right? The circuit is open. The calls will no longer reach to the provider service. At that case, when further requests come now, at that time, the response will be sent back to the client. Maybe we will send any error messages, or maybe we will have some response which is already cached and makes sense as per the business scenario. So, whenever circuit breaker will detect that there is something wrong, right? So it will take some temporary steps to our situation, because if it allows to call the product service, it's going to block all the resources. And if threads keep waiting for very long, the whole system might come down, because if threads are not being freed up, right? Memory is held up by the calling services, and they're waiting for the product service. So it might be that the system can even not work at all. So to avoid a situation temporarily, circuit breaker will trip that circuit, open that circuit. So there will be no further calls happening to product service. And then the response will be either something which is more meaningful, maybe some error messages or some cache response will be sent back to the calling services, right? So this is how the circuit breaker pattern works. So it basically uh, makes your application more fault tolerant, because there may be hundreds of microservices, and just because of one microservice not working fine, you don't want to stop whole flow, right? You don't want to risk that your whole app goes down. So this is a very helpful pattern in case of microservices. So, yeah, there are three stages in circuit breaker pattern. Like one is the closed state, right? Closed means everything is fine. Okay, the calling and caller are connected properly. There is no delay and nothing is slow. So circuit is closed. So there is no issue. So whenever we are in closed circuit, that is fine. But the circuit breaker component will keep monitoring. Okay, so how many requests are failed, how many requests are going through fine. So there will be a failure threshold. So suppose the failure threshold is reached. At that time, circuit breaker will open the circuit. So suppose there are many errors happening in last few minutes. If that error threshold passes beyond a predefined level, then it will open the circuit. So now when a circuit is open, it doesn't mean that it will keep open for a long time, okay, or somebody has to go to manually and close it. No. It also monitors, okay, suppose there are requests in hundreds, right? So we also try for one or two requests to check, okay, if that service is already backed up or still down. So it will reset to half open. In the half open state, some request will go through that circuit breaker, and it will check, okay, if the service is back or not. If not back, it will again go to open state. Otherwise, like suppose you are trying for like in half open state and circuit is still not working. I mean, there's just still issue with the microservice. Then it will be failed, right? So again, open that circuit, and it won't allow any more calls. Similarly, it will keep repeating, and once there are success threshold passed, right? Suppose now service is backed up, maybe there was some temporary issue, some memory issue, that is fine now. Then it will come back to the closed state from the half open. So these are the three transient states which keep happening in this circuit breaker pattern, and this is how it is managing. So basically, in this, there will be some health check endpoints, right? Of that microservice, the provider one, and the circuit breaker will keep monitoring it. Suppose that health of that service goes down, then it will open the circuit. Then it will also half open to make sure that it can test it, okay, whether it is back or not. So this is how like these are three states. So you can understand like this is very critical pattern in terms of fault tolerance and resiliency of our microservices based system. So in this video, that's it. I will also cover the various ways, like what are the various strategies to implement the circuit breaker pattern in microservices in my next video. Then we'll see like what are the various options, like we have the resiliency for J framework, and also we have the Netflix Heuristic framework. So we'll also look into those in my upcoming videos. For now, thank you for watching. Yeah, so basically to conclude, right? So ultimately, what is happening that in this circuit breaker pattern, it is guarding our microservices against the failure. So if something is happening at one microservice, it is stopping the further calls, and then it basically detect the problem quickly so that the overall system is not going down, and response back to the client is within the predefined mutually agreed limits. There is no delay like for responses. So thank you very much for watching. See you next time. Please leave comments or questions, and please subscribe as well if you like my video. Thanks.